Welcome back to Dash for Adventure. Today we're in the foothills of the Appalachia, looking for a place that was once known as Monkey Town. Stay with us to find out more about this strange, odd town. We're pulling into a small town that is miles and miles away from the interstate. Welcome to Dayton, Tennessee. Join us as we try to figure out why this town was once known as Monkey Town. Back in 1920, I think 1925, we'll find out for sure, there was a trial here that rocked the nation. This statue is of William Jennings Bryan. He was on the prosecution side. And this statue is of Clarence Darrow. He was on the defense side. Let's go inside and find out more about this. This is the courthouse where the Scopes trial was held. So the courtroom's on the second floor. The museum is in the basement. The original clock tower mechanism. This is a beautiful museum, especially to be in a basement. That's a beautiful photo of Dayton, Tennessee back in the day, at Smith's Crossroads. This part of the museum appears to be telling us more about the region in this area, more than about the Scopes trial. But there is another area. And that area is right into that room. So let's go check that out. So, from what I've learned, and while I learned about this in school, I didn't know the great details that I've learned today. The Butler Act was passed that prohibited the teachings of Darwinian theory of evolution in the state of Tennessee. And John Scopes was a teacher here in Dayton, Tennessee. But the catchy thing about this is, at the time, John Scopes was just a substitute teacher. And while he didn't even remember whether he had actually taught evolution or not, there were some business owners and community members that thought, if we can get this trial, we'll put Dayton on the map. So those community members got together with others and decided that the ACLU's promise that they would defend anybody that was caught teaching evolution in the state of Tennessee. And they built a list of people they could use, characters, if you will, in a play that came to life as the Scopes Monkey Trial. My whole life, I thought this was a legitimate case. And while it is a real court case that truly happened, John Scopes and the students that testified against him really were just actors. They were just community members that had been told what to say so that the ACLU would bring this case to Dayton, Tennessee. And bring it to Dayton, Tennessee they did. This case was enormous. They have the upstairs courtroom, which is fully restored. And we'll check that out in a moment. But it's been said that there were 800 to 1,000 people in that courtroom for those few days in 1925, from July 10th to July 21st, I believe it is. And the entire court case was about whether or not John Scopes broke the law by teaching evolution. Robinson Drugs is where those community members first met and decided if they could get some people to bring the case to Dayton, it would be good for business. I highly recommend reading up on this case, this history, this piece of Americana. It gets a little confusing when you start reading into who was selected and how they were selected for the defense and for the prosecution, one of which was William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan died 5 days after the trial ended. William Jennings Bryan was Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson. He was a 3-time presidential candidate, and he was called the father of the modern Democratic Party. Extremely popular orator of his day, speaking as many as 250 times a year to huge crowds. Why Dayton, Tennessee, of all places? We were approaching the Great Depression, and cities needed to do whatever they could to bring business to their towns. Dayton, Tennessee is also home of Bryan College. Welcome to the courtroom in Dayton, Tennessee, where the Scopes trial took place. The trial is often referred to as the Scopes monkey trial because it was over evolution being taught in schools in Tennessee. Of course, Dayton is a train town, but if you could imagine Judge Ralston presiding, the defendant, John T. Scopes, with his slew of attorneys, the head of which was Clarence Darrow. And then the prosecution had their own list of attorneys as well. The head prosecutor there, though, was Clarence Jennings Bryan. There's a college here named Bryan College, and it is named after William Jennings Bryan. This would have been Judge Ralston's place. And they would have called up their witnesses to sit up here. And here's the view from the judge's seat. So your defendant would have been over here, your prosecution would have been over here. Everything I've read says that the jury would have been to the judge's left, and to the audience's right. However, when speaking to the Historical Society here, they say the jury was set up to the right of the judge, and they still have the seats here. And they do a reproduction of the Scopes trial every year. I think it would be cool to attend that. This room barely holds 400 people. It would be packed with 400 people. And historical documents say that there were 800 to 1,000 people here daily for the Scopes trial, that it was so packed that people would set ladders up to the second floor windows right there and watch inside the windows just to get a piece of the attention of this massive trial that rocked the nation. Imagine sitting right here, front row. No, I could never afford front row. So let's go back here where I can probably afford, where you and I would probably be sitting. Somewhere on the back row. There we go. Now imagine all the people in front of us here, and they're arguing the case of whether or not evolution should be taught in schools in the state of Tennessee. And of course, William Jennings Bryan, devout Christian, he's preaching and defending the Bible and saying that the Bible is the Word. And Clarence Darrow is, of course, saying science is a different subject and thus should be taught separately and not be considered by religious beliefs. The climax of the court happened when Clarence Darrow called the prosecuting attorney himself to the stand. And when Bryan took the stand, Clarence Darrow assaulted him with questions about the reality and the factual basis of the Bible, trying to get him to tell him whether or not it could be scientifically proven or whether it was a fact if certain things mentioned in the Bible weren't true, such as were days 24 hours a day during Genesis? If Adam and Eve were first, where did Cain find his wife? Now, I'll leave these questions to you, but that's where the climax happened. And the whole courtroom erupted. But at the end of the day, Judge Ralston said that none of the religious implications, none of the religious testimony whatsoever could be used by the jury to make their decision. This was simply a basis of, did John T. Scopes violate the law? Yes, he did. He taught evolution when the Butler Act was on the books for Tennessee that you could not teach evolution. So, in fact, he did break the law. Simple. Just imagine this courtroom erupting with all those people. When they do the reenactment play, they actually choose some people from the audience to be on the jury. You could be sitting right here, and you could have your opinion heard in the jury of the John T. Scopes trial right here in Dayton, Tennessee. We'll leave a link below in case you want to buy tickets and come. I think Paul and I both will be here this year. Of course, it's in July. Not the exact same dates that the original trial was, but still in July. I think the original dates were July 10th through July 21st of 1925. This year it will be in July, but not those dates precisely. I was born in Georgia, but I've spent most of my life right here in Tennessee, and I love this flag, and I love our history here. All right, let's see what else we can find. There's actually still part of Rhea County government operation still in this courthouse. Looks like the Election Commission, the Rhea County Executive, Rhea County Archives, and of course the Rhea County Historical Society. And there's the clock tower. It's on top of the courthouse. And of course, we saw the old mechanics from that downstairs in the museum. So it turns out that John Scopes was found guilty and fined $100, which is about $1,800 to $2,000 in today's money. Then it went to the Supreme Court of Tennessee. One would think that if it's going to the Supreme Court, they're going to take up the real issue, but they didn't. By the way, if you're a musician, that is an excellent music store. But as I was saying, the Supreme Court did not take up the case. They actually kicked it back down to lower court after claiming that The case was invalid due to a technicality. At that time in the state of Tennessee, no judge could order a fine more than $50. And, well, a $100 fine was a technicality they needed. It was a hot year, election year. The Supreme Court judges were up for election that year. So they kicked it back down, washed their hands of it, and said, we didn't want to hear a case like this again. Easy way to stay out of it. Keep it out of the news and keep it from causing problems. So there's the courtroom. Imagine standing on ladders just to be able to see what was going on in the Scopes monkey trial. Oh, yes.
It's got colder.
So there's the government annex building, and many of the operations of Rhea County have moved over here. So if you're out in East Tennessee and you want to find out more about the Scopes monkey trial, come to Dayton, Tennessee. They have a strawberry festival every year too. We'll make a video about that if we come out and see it this year. Thank you guys for joining us on this little adventure to Rhea County, Tennessee. We hope to see you in the comments, and we'll catch you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.